Hi, welcome. We're here with the Open Door. I'm Robin Stone. I'm the registered dietitian. And this is Rachel Ori. She's our community education coordinator. And we have Tess' husband with us, and she is our AmeriCorps Fellow for the year. And today's topic is eating well on a budget. And we're going to feature minestrone soup. Rachel's going to give us a demo of that. And minestrone soup also ties into the lunch today. We are bringing minestrone as part of that. So we'll have Rachel take it away.
All right, let's get started. So minestrone is a nice, simple, easy soup recipe that you can make with almost any vegetables you have on hand. We're doing a classic version, which is with onion, celery, carrot, some garlic, diced tomatoes, kidney beans, and chickpeas, and peas, and then we're going to add in some pasta. So we're going to start off with dicing our onions. We want to start with cutting off the top and the bottom. And the onion peels can be difficult to work with sometimes. So if you cut off the top and bottom so you have a nice flat, stable surface, and then you cut the onion in half, standing it on its end, then you have some nice corners to peel the skin off very easily. I'm going to set these aside. If you have a Ziploc bag while you're making this, you can put your onion tops and peels into the Ziploc bag, and same with the bottom of the celery and the top of the carrot, the ends of the carrot, and then you can stick them in your freezer and keep filling it up every time you make a soup like this, or you're prepping onions, celery, carrots. And then when the bag is full, you can dump it into a pot with some water and let it cook, and you have a very simple, pretty much free vegetable broth.
It also is a great way to have low sodium vegetable broth because you get to decide if you're going to put salt in and how much you're going to put in.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to start with cutting the onion into slices one direction, keeping my fingers out of the way, and then I will turn it 90 degrees and slice it in the other direction, and now I have a diced onion.
Nice cut, Rachel.
Thank you.
And I noticed you used that bear claw too, holding onto the onion to make sure your fingers were out of the way.
Yes, very important to keep your fingertips out of the way when you're cutting anything. All right. Now that I have half of my onion cut, I'm going to add a couple tablespoons of olive oil to the pot. Okay. The reason I didn't add the olive oil right away is because it takes a little time to cut the onion, and I didn't want it to get too hot before I add the onion. But now that I have some onion, I'm going to add it in there. Turn it up a little bit. All right, and we'll do the same thing with the other half of the onion. I find that it helps to make a bridge with my hand, with my fingers, and gently squeeze the slices of the onion together so they don't all fall apart. Then turn, continue slicing. The other thing is to keep the tip of your knife steady on the cutting board. That will give you more control and it'll be much safer. All right. Now I'm going to cut up the celery. Just going to cut off the ends, add them to my freezer bag. You can add other things to your broth freezer bag. You can add herbs. If you use parsley for a recipe, fresh parsley, you can put the stems and extra leaves in there.
And today we're making we're making the recipe to be our original produce that we use, but you really can use any that you have on hand. The onions and the celery and the carrot together are called mirepoix, and that's a great base of just about any soup. But if you don't have celery, no problem, you can still make the soup. You can use other vegetables like zucchini. You could put in some yellow squash, or what are some other ideas, Rachel?
Some green, you could do green beans, you could do sweet potato, bell peppers, broccoli, pretty much any vegetables that you have that you'd like to enjoy. You could add some fresh greens or frozen greens, spinach, kale.
Right. And some of the vegetables you would add toward the end because you wouldn't want them to overcook, like the broccoli.
Yeah. There we go. I'm just cutting my carrots. It's a large carrot, so I'm cutting it in half first and then having a nice stable surface to continue cutting on. All right. It is helpful to attempt to aim to get all of your vegetables into approximately the same size. That will ensure that they cook evenly and at approximately the same amount of time. You could also make this recipe with frozen vegetables. They don't need as much time to cook, which could even make it more convenient. Frozen vegetables are just as packed with nutrition as fresh vegetables.
And it's an especially economic way to get your vegetables and fruits for that matter, excuse me. Because you don't have to worry about spoilage. You can keep it in the freezer, and when you're ready to use it, just pull it out.
Yep. For garlic, today we're using pre-peeled garlic, but if you have whole bulbs of garlic, a nice trick to get the paper off, the skin off, is you take a clove and put a flat knife on top and just smash it with your hand, and comes out like this, and the paper, the peel on the outside is much easier to take off that way. So when I'm cooking at home, I do that, and it's very helpful. Again, when you keep the tip of your knife on the board, you have much more control over what you're doing. So I'm slicing the garlic and then just going to give it a nice rough chop. You could use minced garlic. You could use garlic powder.
Yeah, those are good points that you don't have to have fresh garlic on hand.
Mm-hmm. The garlic does give such a nice flavor, and it's packed with nutrients. All right, got the garlic in there. So all of our fresh ingredients are in the pan now. So give them a stir, get them coated with the oil. Sorry, that was loud stirring. Okay. And so we'll let those cook to soften for a bit. Meanwhile, we would open our cans of beans and peas and rinse them. So we have chickpeas, I don't know if you can see that, chickpeas and dark red kidney beans, which are packed with fiber and protein and lots of great minerals. And we're using canned peas today, but you can use frozen peas, fresh peas. I guess that's all the options.
Yeah. Or another vegetable like Rachel mentioned, green beans. That would be a really good alternative to peas.
And the reason why we recommend that you drain and rinse your beans is to remove some of the added sodium that is included in the cans when they're packaged. And then we're also going to add in 2 cans of diced tomatoes. Let me just stir this a little bit. All right. All right. So over here we have some broth that's been heating up. You don't need to heat up your broth ahead of time. We decided to make the total cooking process go a little bit faster. So I'm going to very carefully pour this into this pot.
All right, you got this.
Okay. So that's 8 cups of broth. Today we're using vegetable broth, but you can use chicken broth. The recipe actually that we're giving out calls for chicken broth or vegetable broth actually. So whatever broth if you have a favorite broth, add it on in. It's a very beautiful soup with the green and the orange blending together. All right. Let's add in our chickpeas. So these are pre-rinsed. We rinsed them ahead of time. And some kidney beans. You could also use whatever beans you have on hand, white beans, black beans, pinto beans. I'm going to add in our peas. All right. So you're going to want to bring this all to a boil, and then once it's boiling, we're going to add some pasta. And then the pasta will cook in the soup. All right, let's add the tomatoes because they're going to need to heat up too. Oh, thanks. All right. Our tomatoes. And then we have here 1 tablespoon of dried oregano. You can use fresh oregano if you'd like. If you're using fresh oregano, you need twice the amount of dried oregano. So the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of fresh. So instead, we're using 1 tablespoon of dried. And that conversion goes for pretty much any herb. If
And
a res-
No, that's a great way to make it economical. Again, using dried herbs and spices lasts a long time, and it's really an inexpensive way to go.
Yep, yeah. And then we're just going to add a little black pepper. And a little salt. It's always a good idea to start with less salt and then taste it later. And if you would like to add more later, you can do that. Or let individual people add their own salt to their own servings. So there's our beautiful soup, minus the pasta. So we're just going to let that continue to heat up and come to a boil. And meanwhile, we can talk about eating healthy on a budget.
Yeah, great. So the first thing you want to do is think about the week ahead and what kind of meals you want to make for yourself. Especially economical entrees or casseroles, soups and stews, stir fries, and grain bowls. A grain bowl is a really cool thing. I'm going to hand that over to Rachel because she's an expert in grain bowls.
Grain bowls are essentially a build-your-own meal that includes some sort of grain, a cooked grain such as rice, quinoa, bulgur, farro. You could use couscous. You could use noodles. Some sort of grain or starch as the base, and then you add some vegetables, some protein, and some additional seasonings. So for example, you could have a bowl of rice and top it with steamed carrots and broccoli and a hard-boiled egg, and drizzle it with some sauce, maybe put some sesame seeds on top or something like that, maybe some avocado. So you can really customize it based on what you have. You could make it seasonal. You could use beets and winter squash and steamed kale as your vegetables, and then add whatever protein you happen to have on hand or protein that you like.
Yeah, it could be beans, chicken, it could be sliced beef.
Yep.
It could even be tofu if you want to go that
Absolutely.
route.
Yeah, and eggs are super easy and cheap to add. Eggs are my favorite grain bowl topping.
Yeah. Another great concept is a salad in a jar. So that way you can make, a couple of meals worth in advance. And it's really simple because all you need to do is add some dressing to the top. So basically salad in the jar as you build up your ingredients and pack them in. All right, so you want to be thinking about what you're going to have for the week. And then you probably want to check your cupboard space, your freezer space, and refrigerator to see how much room you have to put your groceries in. You want to check for the circulars. They still come in the mail, although you can also check online if that works for you, and see what's on sale that week to help you figure out how to best utilize the grocery store. And to compare prices while you're at the store is also another handy way to get the most for your money. That being said, you might want to bring a magnifying glass or even your smartphone to use to compare labels, both for nutrients, like sodium, for example, and also so you can compare prices. So you want to look at foods that, some foods you're going to find out they're on sale when you get to the store rather than the circular. And you want to kind of shop think about the most expensive parts of the aisle first and what you're going to get, and then kind of build in the rest from there. And buying stuff in season definitely helps with the wallet. So right now, tomatoes, root vegetables such as carrots, onions, squashes, winter squashes, summer squashes are still, really nice and fresh. And so you want to think about what foods tend to be less expensive, things like canned tuna. We've mentioned frozen vegetables. Frozen fruits are also a great way to go. They don't have sugar added typically, so you can go ahead and use them in a smoothie. You can defrost them and use them on your plain yogurt. You could make a parfait with oatmeal and plain yogurt is another way to go. And also you want to be thinking about ways to help you get more money while you're at the supermarket. So food stamps were also called SNAP for supplemental nutrition and I'm forgetting the last one.
Supplemental
Program.
Nutrition Assistance Program.
Right. So that can help you actually have more money when you get to the cash register. And SNAP comes with an extra handy feature in Massachusetts called HIP. It stands for Healthy Incentives Program. You can actually get up to $40 a month in free produce by going to farmers markets when that's available in season.
And farm stands.
And farm stands, thank you, like Marshall's farm stand accepts SNAP. Finally, you can use the open door to get free food. It's a great way to really save a lot of money, and then you can get other items at the grocery store that we may not have available, such as olive oil, any meats or fish that you want, and whole grains and nuts. Things that are more pricey, you'll be able to afford those better if you get less expensive or free food otherwise. Yeah. Any other thoughts, you guys?
Other thoughts I had on, in terms of meals to plan, soups, as we're making today, are very economical and pretty simple options in terms of meal planning. You make a soup and you can be enjoying that the rest of the week. And for protein, eggs are a really great budget option, as well as beans. Beans are high in protein, high in fiber, they're very filling, and they can be very cheap, especially if you buy them dry and then cook them yourself. Buying them in the cans is a great option, but you're going to save even more money if you buy them dry, soak them and cook them for a couple of hours, and then you can make a bunch at a time and then freeze them in containers. Beans freeze really well, grains freeze really well, so if you cook a batch of rice, you can then pack containers of that and put it in the freezer, then it's all cooked and ready to go. Convenience foods at the grocery store, you'll end up spending a lot more money on prepared foods. So if you can make meals ahead from scratch and put them in the freezer for later, then you have your own convenience food and you're not spending as much on it. Some other thoughts are if you buy some things in bulk, like a large pack of chicken thighs or something, then you can put them into smaller packages and put them in the freezer. I talk about the freezer a lot. The freezer is my best budget friend, I think.
Yeah, it's a great way to preserve food.
Yes. It's a great way to not waste. And also, speaking of not wasting, things like this, when you save the ends of your vegetables and use them for a broth. Another thing, you could have another bag and put pieces of fruit that maybe aren't super fresh anymore, but they're still good. They're just not as pleasant to eat fresh. You can stick those and save those in a zipper bag. And then later, you can turn them into a sauce. You can make them into a smoothie. Lots of options for your leftover fresh or less fresh fruits.
That's great, especially if you are going to the farmer's market or a farm stand. You may get more than you can use at that time. And go ahead and freeze it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Soups and casseroles and stews, they make great ways to freeze leftovers. And so what you want to do is get small containers so that you have individual portions. You can even use leftover containers that you get from the supermarket sometimes.
Yep, and if you freeze a soup, if it's cool enough, you can put it in a sturdy Ziploc bag and freeze it flat in your freezer, and then you can stack them. And they also thaw much faster when they're flat like that. So that's another nice freezing option.
Yeah. And we're featuring minestrone today because it's both very budget friendly and it's the soup that we're serving at Rosie's Cafe. So it's being featured, so you'll get to have a nice bowl of it.
Yeah. So the next step would be adding our pasta into the soup. Is, however, not yet boiling because it just takes a little while.
We're also using a hot plate instead of doing it home on the stove, so that can make it a little bit more challenging.
Yes. This would cook a lot faster in your home. But I will open up the pasta and measure it. Without spilling the entire bag.
So Rachel, another idea is when you're at home, you might want to put a cover on it to make it cook faster. We don't have a cover for this particular pot, so that's also part of why it's taking so long. We're using regular white macaroni today, but you can also use whole grain if you want pasta, and it doesn't have to be macaroni. It could be rotini or penne, or you could even break up spaghetti into smaller sticks and use that.
You could use gluten-free pasta. If you really wanted to make your own version, you could do rice instead.
Yeah. And Rachel, about how long do you put the pasta in to let it cook, but not overdone?
Once the soup has come to a boil, and then you add the pasta in, you want it to cook for 11 to 12 minutes, so just so it's cooked through. So yeah,
great.
If you want, you could top it with Parmesan cheese. You could put croutons on it. I don't know. Serve it with a nice slice of bread. So it's very beautiful.
Or a salad.
Lots of colors. Salad, whatever you want. Yeah. So there we go.
And you can use this either as a soup that goes along with your entree, or it can be the entree itself. Like Rachel said, you might serve it with a slice of bread, make a complete meal.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's minestrone soup.
Yeah.